welcome to D6 Damage. Today we're doing a two-handed Paladin build. I'm D6.
And I am D2.
Alright, so what this Paladin build is all about, it's about really getting as much damage out there as possible.
It's about maximizing the damage potential, because if there are two things that a Paladin does really well, it's taking damage and dishing damage. And the way a Paladin does those things is kind of unique to the Paladin in a couple of ways.
So basically, you're going to be out in the middle of a battlefield, and you can just set up camp there and just let the monsters form a conga line past you.
Because the Paladin, especially when you start getting to later level content, is going to outclass the fighter for a number of reasons. The first and easiest being its Divine Grace. In your lower levels, you're going to get an ability called Divine Grace, which lets you add your Charisma bonus, if any, to all of your saves. Yes, all of your saves.
And that's all covered in the Paladin Guide, which you can see right here. Okay, this video does assume that you have seen that, so going forward, we're just going to breeze through these terms. Alright, so, when you first make the character, your first choice, because you already know your class, you're a Paladin, who specializes in a two-handed weapon, you need to pick your race. You have kind of a menu of options. So first off, you have Classic Human.
And the Human is good for Paladin for the same reason the Human is good for the rest of the classes. You get one ability score bonus at level 1. You get to assign that to whatever you want. And for us, the aspiring two-handing Paladin, that you're probably going to want to choose Strength.
Exactly. You also get that fantastic bonus feat.
Mm-hmm. Which you want to use early to grab a weapon focus, or really just kind of any other myriad of options that you can grab at level 1.
Toughness is another good one to give you that additional HP, as if you didn't have enough.
But we'll talk about feats more in a moment.
Yeah, exactly. Alright, kind of an okay option, but certainly not one to overlook, is the Mighty Dwarf.
Because, as a Paladin, we're going to be running around in armor, and really, one of the saving graces of the class is you get a bonus to Constitution, good for health. We're going to be in the middle of the fight, so we're going to need as much of that as we can get. And along with that, you get the Steady race feature, which gives you a base speed of 20 feet, but one that is not reduced by armor, and that's important.
Dwarves also have a number of helpful resistances to things that might try and mess with you. Also, they have dark vision, so if you are going to be going, say, into the Underdark, a stalwart dwarf paladin, not a bad thing to be.
A recurring theme with a lot of the races we're going to be talking about is that you get a bonus to one of your two skills, or rather abilities, that you want, and essentially be trying to stomach a penalty to something else that's kind of livable. With a lot of the races, that's what you want. You want a penalty to one of your major requirements for the Paladin, and everything else is going to be, it'll either help you or hurt you, but you just need to be aware of it. But that a lot of these races can build into more or less acceptable Paladins, but there are sort of optimum paths to take.
But we're mainly going over the really good ones. And another really good one is the Half-Elf.
Because you have resistances to enchantments and charm effects, which are some of the nastiest that you can pull out of a spellbook, and that's sort of what the later level fighter is going to be afraid of in fights. As
well they should be. Then there's the Angel-Blooded Aasimar, which really has kind of the perfect stats for this Paladin build. You get a +2 to Strength and a +2 to Charisma.
Okay, so we've left the common races, and now we're in the uncommon races with the Aasimar. Now, the Aasimar, as it is presented, vanilla, is okay and usable, but if your DM will either let you use Aasimars in the first place, or let you use the alternate race heritage, you can go with the Angel-Blooded, which literally gives you everything that you want. So if you're going to go with an Aasimar, and you're allowed to use the alternate racial builds, go with the Angel-Blooded.
Yeah, Aasimar also get a number of cool features, like the ability to see in darkness, and do they naturally have like the Angel Blood where it harms the undead if they are wounded, or is that a feat thing?
They do have the Outsider subtype, so it'd be very easy to make that argument. But,
okay. All right, well, never mind. We're not really going into that right here. Mm-hmm. There are actually a couple of good options for this build in the uncommon races, so this is going to be up to DM discretion whether or not they'll let you have them. The first one is the Nagaji.
because you get a bonus to strength and charisma, which are our primary stats, or rather, it is the stats that we get the most out of. With the Nagaji, bonus to strength, bonus to charisma, you get natural armor kind of off the bat. AC bonuses are always nice.
And the second good option among the uncommon races is the... How do you say this?
It is the Suli.
The Suli, which is basically a part genie.
And you want them for the same reasons that you want the Nagaji. Bonuses to strength, bonuses to charisma. The penalty's really survivable.
They can also add elemental damage to one of their melee attacks,
which is a good way to just get just an extra d6 in.
Okay, now once you've chosen your race, let's talk about your base ability scores. Your primary stat is going to be strength.
Your secondary stats after that are charisma and constitution. Charisma, because that's divine grace. It's what lets us stay in fights after the fighter has to bow out after failing too many will saving throws in a row. And you want your constitution. Like we said earlier, you're going to be in the middle of the fight and you need to be okay with that. But more than that, you need to be able to stay in that fight.
Yeah, charisma is also good for lay on hands, which is more heals.
That's correct.
All right, your tertiary stats, things that aren't really that important, but, if you have... Either if you've rolled for your stats and you have a couple of good ones, or, you're point buying and you've maybe, this is something you don't want to mess that much with, are wisdom and dexterity.
So wisdom only gives you a bonus to a couple of primary stats. Gives you bonus to sense motive, gives you bonus to perception, which is the most important skill in the game, I might add. However, you are not the skill monkey. You get 2 plus your intelligence modifier, and if you have to dump intelligence, which we'll talk about in just a moment, you're going to have -1 for a net of +1 skill points per level. And that's helped a little bit if you pick a human, but outside of that, you're not going to be the skill monkey. You're not going to be getting a whole lot, which means probably all of those skill points are going to be going into perception. So you don't feel disappointed if you don't have a high wisdom modifier.
And your dump stat is intelligence.
Which, for the same reasons, you're not going to have a whole lot of skill points, so don't worry about it, and definitely don't build for it. And the last one we haven't talked about quite yet is dexterity. Dexterity is nice because it gives you a bonus to AC. Again, always fun, but early on, especially, you're going to be in probably the heaviest set of armor you can afford, which means your armor check penalty will be on the higher side, which means your strength and dex-based skills are going to be taking a heavy hit. So again, don't worry if they're low, just try not to itemize for them.
Also, if you are involved in ranged combat, you always have the highest base attack bonus, so that's something you're going to have if you're, say, using your bow or javelins or whatever you choose as your ranged weapon.
So you have ways to circumvent some of the more naturally occurring penalties that happen when you dump stats, especially your physical stats.
All right, now let's talk feats. For feats, we're going to assume that you picked one of the races other than human. For your bonus feat as a human, pick something that's going to be helpful, like toughness or weapon focus. Just one of those good all-round feats. So anyway, your first feat, and this is going to be kind of the thing which is really going to define your fighting style, is power attack.
So you want power attack at level 1 because it's your bread and butter, and we're going to talk about this in just a moment when we go over the equipment you're probably going to want to take. But you want power attack because you're going to be running around with a two-handed weapon, the biggest one you can find. We personally recommend the greatsword. We're rather fond of it. But you want power attack to abuse the strength and a half bonus you get for wielding a weapon in two hands. And the power attack bonus is multiplied by time and a half for using a two-handed weapon. It's all about doubling up and getting these bonuses wherever we can find them.
All right, so at level 3, a good one to take would be weapon focus because you need to be able to hit in order to do damage. The highest strength bonus in the world doesn't matter if you don't make contact with what you're trying to cut in half.
Your feat at level 5 is going to be Vital Strike. Now, there is a lot to be said about the Vital Strike and the feats along in this tree, but we're just going to grab it at level at level 5. And that's not necessarily at level 5 because you need to be level 6 to get it. So we're using our level 5 feat to get it at level 6.
It's basically kind of like having the feat on layaway. It's like we're going to reserve this feat so we can take it next level.
But you want Vital Strike just because it's an extra a 2d 2d6 if you're using the greatsword, and mainly because, though, it does take an attack action, and that caveat is very important to make when you're talking about the value of Vital Strike, especially at early levels. But later on, when you start having the base attack bonus to get multiple attacks in, and your base attack bonus and your strength bonus, and you have weapon focus, and all of that stuff stacks to give you much more value out of making multiple attacks in a single round. This is talking about when you get to level 6. And at this point, you have 2 attacks, and the other one's a -5. So, we recommend taking Vital Strike 2. Again, getting the most out of a single attack, and it's an additional weapon damage dice. So, unless you're talking about its scaling into other skill or other feat trees or other endgame content, we'd recommend Vital Strike. It'll do you just fine.
Alright, then at 7th level, we recommend that you take Improved Sunder. Basically, what Sunder is you make an attack action against either a piece of armor or a weapon or some other item, and what you have to do is bypass its hardness, and then any additional damage you do, basically, it damages the weapon, and once it passes a certain point, it becomes broken, and then after that, it's simply destroyed, and then it's no longer usable.
The exact figures behind that are, when you damage a weapon to half of its hit points, it becomes broken, and the user gains heavy penalties. I believe the armor check penalty for armor that is considered broken is doubled. So armor is harder to wear, weapons are harder to wield, but you break the items to get them closer to destroying them. And once they're destroyed, they're literally just gone. Dust in the wind.
Okay, now kind of like Vital Strike, this feat isn't always going to be useful to you, especially if you're going up against creatures that, say, have natural weapons or are kind of weird incorporeal things that don't use weapons to attack you and have nothing to sunder. But it's going to happen often enough that it's still a good idea to have this option.
Because you're always more than welcome to use Sunder on inanimate and unattended objects like pillars, doors, wagon wheels, etc. Sundering attempts, like Magic and Pathfinder, they favor the creative. Find ways to use them and find ways to get use out of them. But this is also a guide. This is how we would do it based on our own experiences and our own preferences. If you feel, in the context of the campaign, you will be playing your Paladin in, that something else would be more appropriate, by all means, don't take our word as law. We're just trying to guide you in picking feats that will be better suited for what we believe the Paladin should be doing, especially the two-handing Paladin.
Well said, D2. Alright, so at 9th level, take Improved Critical.
Because you have your two-handed greatsword, which has a 19 to 20 crit. When you take Improved Crit, that should give you 17 to 20. Mm-hmm. Which is just, again, it's the most damage potential. It's just trying to get the most out of this weapon as we can. And once we get the ability to take it, you should.
Alright. And we're also going to give you up to your 11th level feat, which we recommend as Blind Fight. Because once you get to that sort of level in the game, you're going to be coming across creatures which have things like invisibility, and having Blind Fight can really help you with that.
Because that's the easiest way to counter a player, especially a big dumb fighter, especially a paladin. Give them a target they can't hit. Like we said earlier, all the damage dice in the world, it doesn't matter if you can't hit it. And Blind Fight is kind of the easiest. It's a single feat, and it'll mitigate a lot of the problems you're going to have. This applies when you cannot see your opponent, and that means darkness if you take a race that doesn't have dark vision. This means invisibility when you fight annoying Fae. You'll get a surprising amount of mileage out of this feat. Just we heavily recommend this one, but like with earlier, if you don't find anything that's invisible, then you're not going to get any use for it.
All right, now, and how do you find something that's invisible?
Glitter dust.
Okay.
Lots of them just glitter. You mail them that little jar that spring loaded and shoots glitter. You just mail it to them. Just waiting in the bushes outside, and they open it, just glitter, and just ha ha ha. You kill them on their doorstep. All
right, so now let's talk about your gear. So first off, your weapon of choice, the thing that will see you to the gates of hell and back, is going to be your greatsword.
There's a reason Guts takes it. There's a reason that
Cloud takes it.
There's a reason Cloud takes it. You just find the biggest hunk of sharpened metal you can find. Stick a handle in that thing and put it on your back, because that's just Just grab it. It's going to be the best. We promise you.
Yeah, great swords do 2d6 damage and have a 20 to 19 crit range.
Which is, it's always good. Expended crits for potential damage, always good. You have 2d6, so, however, technically speaking, it's going to be at least a little bit objectively better than the Great Axe, because you can't roll a 1 rolling 2 dice.
Now, every once in a while, you may find yourself going up against something with, like, DR slashing, or maybe you're in a 5-foot hallway, and for some reason the DM says you don't have enough room to swing your greatsword. So in those circumstances, you should have a backup weapon, and we recommend a Morning Star.
Because it's not going to be that expensive, and you get 2 different damage types out of it, and that's bludgeoning and piercing, or bashing and piercing.
All right, now let's talk armor. You want to go as heavy as you can get, as fast as you can get it.
There's going to be 2 almost philosophies when you talk about arming the frontline fighter. You can either go medium armor, like a breastplate, and aim for mithril, which means you end up at light, which means you get your full 30 feet of movement speed. However, since mithril is a little bit expensive, and depending on the theme of your campaign, rare or just not available, you probably want the heaviest set of armor you can find. And like we said with the dexterity, don't worry if you don't have high dexterity and strength skill scores. You're not supposed to, so don't feel bad if they're not as high as they could be.
Alright, finally, let's talk about your magic items. And this is going to be for when you get to that point in the game where you can either afford them yourself, or maybe the DM will have something nice put away for you after a boss fight. So the things you're going to want is anything that improves your strength score.
Because you are a fighter, strength is your primary stat. Bonuses to hit, bonuses to damage. It's what you want, especially considering we're going with the 2-handed fighter build. You get that strength and a half bonus. Is just everything is so nice about getting bonuses to strength.
All right. You're also going to want something to improve your charisma. If you can get it, that's just because more lay on hands, higher saves because of your divine grace.
And you're playing the good guy, so it's always nice with the chiseled chins and the nice hair. And
Exactly. And if you can get a magic version of your giant sharpened hunk of metal, also good.
A giant hunk of sharpened metal +1.
Exactly. And hey, why not a cloak of resistance? Because you absolutely should be making your saves.
Nothing says good saves like better saves. You have probably among the higher saves in your party. Why not keep that trophy? And then one quick thing to touch on before we move off of the items is your ranged options. Now, you're not going to have a whole lot of them. Your dex shouldn't be too high. But again, like we mentioned earlier, your base attack bonus scales the best out of the player classes, and that's going to be very important because despite not having a high dex, your base attack bonus should carry you far enough to at least make some sort of a tangible impact in ranged combat. And for that ranged combat, you're probably going to want to go with a mighty compound longbow of a reasonable strength score, or a javelin. Both rely on dex to hit. Again, your base attack bonus should see you off just fine, and those bonuses to strength are always going to be nice.
And that is the 2-handed fighter Paladin build from D6 Damage. Now, if you're interested in more character builds or class analysis guides, check us out right here on YouTube. Thank you for watching.